That's fair.
I call the March 11th, 2024 meeting of the Legislative Commission on Pensions and Retirement to order. A quorum is present. The first item on our agenda is actually approval of the meeting minutes from our last meeting, and that's March 4th, 2024. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
So moved.
Senator Frentz moves approval of the March 4th, 2024 meetings. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails, and the minutes are adopted. Our first bill today is House File 4428 from Representative Nelson and Senate File 4606 from Senator Rasmusson, amending the withdrawal liability for privatization of medical facilities. I will invite Representative Nelson or Senator Nelson. I will invite Representative Nelson or Senator Rasmusson to make a motion on their bill.
I'll move that House File 4428 and Senate File 4608 be recommended to pass and be incorporated in the omnibus pension and retirement bill.
Thank you, Representative Nelson. So now we'll turn to our staff, LCP, our Deputy Director Sean Kelly, to explain the bill for us.
Thank you, Chair Herr. My name is Sean Kelly. I'm the Deputy Director for the Commission. When a medical facility owned by a governmental subdivision is sold to a private sector entity, a process called privatization, the employees that work for the medical facility become private employees. The bill modifies the process and method for calculating withdrawal liability owed to PARA when a medical facility with employees covered by the PARA General Plan is sold to a private sector entity. When a medical facility privatizes, PARA is required, upon request from a city or county that owns the facility, to calculate the withdrawal liability or the amount the facility must pay to PARA. PARA reports that since 1999, no medical facility has ever had to make a payment to PARA for its portion of the plan's unfunded liability, which is not captured by the current calculation method. The current method of calculating withdrawal liability does not properly address the effect on the PARA General Plan. Currently, the medical facility's portion of the unfunded liability is paid by the remaining employers and employees. Due to the change in the way the withdrawal liability is calculated, the bill will increase the cost when a medical facility privatizes. The cost will depend on the number of employees at the facility and the PARA General Plan's funding ratio. The bill has 10 sections. Sections 1 to 5 provide 3 new definitions and amend 2 existing definitions in Chapter 353F. These definitions apply only to this chapter. The new definitions are for funding ratio, general employees retirement fund, and privatize or privatizing. The existing definitions being amended are medical facility and privatization. Section 6 makes changes to the existing process for calculating the withdrawal liability when a medical facility privatizes. The first change is that a city or county with control of a privatizing medical facility must request a calculation of withdrawal liability from PARA prior to the date of privatization. Under the current law, requesting a calculation is optional. Section 6 also changes the way withdrawal liability is calculated. Under the current law, the calculation determines if there is an increase or decrease in liabilities because of the privatization. If there is an increase, the withdrawal liability is the amount of the increase. Under the new calculation, the withdrawal liability is the unfunded liability attributable to the medical facility's active employees. The calculation uses the PARA General Plan's funding ratio and the present value of accrued benefits attributable to the medical facility's active employees. Section 7 requires the medical facility to pay the withdrawal liability to PARA in a lump sum within 6 months after the privatization, or over a period of 10 years with interest at the assumed rate of return, which is currently 7%. Section 8 updates PARA's reporting requirements due to this change in process in the withdrawal liability calculation. Section 9 deletes an obsolete sentence related to augmentation that refers to a statute that was repealed in 2018. Section 10 states that sections 1 through 9 are effective on July 1st, 2025. Thank you, Chair Hurt. That concludes my review.
Thank you, Deputy Director Kelly. Representative Nelson or Senator Rasmusson, do you have any opening remarks that you would like to offer?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Kelly, for the summary of the bill. This bill is pretty simple, though it takes a lot of language to get there. Basically, we want to make sure that if a privatization were to happen, we're not creating an unfunded liability for the para members who are remaining in para general. Right now, under the current law, when we do see these privatizations, it almost always is creating an additional unfunded liability for those who are remaining in para general. If the bill before the commission is adopted, it'll make sure that when a privatization occurs, that para general is kept whole, that no additional unfunded liability is created. I think this is an important bill to pass for fairness purposes and to make sure that we're not encouraging privatizations and effectively subsidizing the privatizations on those who are remaining in para general.
Thank you, Senator Rasmusson. And I do see that we have testifiers here today. So we have two testifiers. The first is Doug Anderson, Executive Director of PARA. If you can make your way up to the table. And, oh, okay. And we also have Amy Strenge, Policy Coordinator for PARA, if you just want to come on up as well.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commission members. I'm Doug Anderson, Executive Director for PARA. Just want to express our appreciation to Representative Nelson and Senator Rasmusson for chief authoring this bill. Over the last 25 years, there's been about 35 healthcare entities that privatized, affecting about 5,000 active members. These members did not pay their fair share of the unfunded liability for their members. It was a flawed test. 20 times this test was applied, 20 times it failed. Looking into it deeper, you could understand that it was really impossible to not fail this test. So it is really due to change. This legislation fixes that test, creates a withdrawal liability. This is very common in the private sector among multi-employer plans. This is really the standard approach there for how they calculate withdrawal liabilities. An example of this is that for an entity that we've seen is that based on the current funding status of the plan, I would likely see that the withdrawal liability would be about equal to 10% of 1 year's payroll. That if that's spread or paid over a 10-year period, it would be an annual contribution of about 1 to 2% of payroll. So that would still leave this entity now privatized, should be able to manage this cost and still provide a healthy retirement benefit to their members, with the combination still being below what they used to contribute at the 7.5% rate. There are around 30 employers that within PARA that meet this criteria that have not privatized. We're not aware of any that are in the process of privatizing. We do have a delayed effective date, and we have determined this withdrawal liability on, we think, reasonable terms for the employer, and we appreciate your support on this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. And Ms. Strenge, are you also going to testify, or are you just here for questions?
I'm here for questions.
Thank you. And are there any members of the public who are here today who would like to testify on this bill? If not, we will move to member questions. Members, any questions or comments on this bill? Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Director Anderson, Executive Director Anderson, a couple of questions for you. You said it's about 10% of annual payroll. Is that a one-time charge to the transaction?
Mr. Anderson.
Madam Chair, Representative O'Driscoll, that's a one-time charge. So in the bill, they could either make a one-time payment or convert to 10 annual payments, but that amount would be a one-time payment. And that was also looking at some examples of recent privatizations to see what it cost. That's the situation when the PARA general plan is around 80% funded, which the plan's better than 80% funded now. And we do expect the plan to improve and become fully funded within 20 years. So as the plan's health improves, the withdrawal liability amount would be reduced and eventually go to zero. If the plan is fully funded, there is no withdrawal liability amount.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And follow up, Mr. Anderson. So in the transaction, two things I want to know. Is the 10% levied against the employer portion of this, or is that a combination between employer and employee contribution to make the separation and the actuarial value work out?
Mr. Anderson.
Madam Chair, Representative O'Driscoll, it's entirely assessed to the employer. We don't believe there's a reasonable mechanism to assess it to employees who are employed by a privatized entity, so be on that privatized entity.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Anderson, is this a number that you are able to provide the parties, the entity that's the public entity that's looking to privatize and the acquiring entity, so that they can have that as a part of their due diligence and negotiate who's going to pay how much, or at least have that number on the table so they know what their transaction costs are?
Director Anderson.
Madam Chair, Representative O'Driscoll, yes. So when an entity first contacts us about privatizing, we can rely on the most recent actuarial evaluation and their member data, do the study, tell them what their cost would be, so they would know going into that transaction.
Representative O'Driscoll.
And just final clarification, Mr. Anderson, then that would freeze individuals at their current benefit rate once they left the public entity, PERA covered, and then they would avail themselves of whatever plan or benefits that their new acquiring private sector enterprise would have. Is that correct?
Director Anderson.
Madam Chair, Representative O'Driscoll, that is correct, and this legislation does not change the impact for the members. They essentially have a frozen accrued benefit. They become fully vested. It's still an obligation for para general plan to pay in the future for that piece.
Senator Friends.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Senator Rasmusson, Representative Nelson. I'm tempted to ask what the privatization has cost para over the last 20, but I'll skip that, or we can talk separately. I do want to thank both of you for bringing the bill forward, and I think to Senator Rasmusson's point, there's a fairness issue, but I'd be interested in hearing more as we go forward about the incentivization issue. You know, we want to make sure we're not doing anything that incentivizes privatization. That's a touchy subject in Greater Minnesota, and so I'll be a yes vote on the bill and appreciate the work. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Friends. And I don't know if you have any comments for what Senator Friends just stated.
Madam Chair, Senator Friends, I gave a really rough estimate that this may have cost our plan about $50 million, that our unfunded would be that much less if we had this in place for the last 25 years.
Thank you. Now we don't have to talk about it offline.
I did have one question, because you had stated that there's been about over 20 of these privatizations. Does this bill go back to ask for those individuals to pay in what they didn't? And why? Just curious as to why, and if we can or cannot do that, because I feel like if we're owed $50 million, boy, I think that'd be really helpful for the plans. Senator Rasmusson, I don't know if you have a response to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The bill does not go back and retroactively assess, and I don't think we'd be able to do that because we had a previous methodology for calculating withdrawal liability under which the privatizations were allowed. And so to go back and retrospectively apply this new formula, I don't think would be appropriate.
Thank you, Senator Rasmussen. Any further discussion? Seeing that there's no further discussion, Representative Nelson and Senator Rasmussen, if you want to offer your closing remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. And again, this is similar to what multi-employer plans do in the private sector, making sure that the plans are whole when groups leave the plan. So it's a fairness issue so that current employees that are continuing working and contributing to the plan aren't having to subsidize other people's pensions.
Thank you, Representative Nelson. And members, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Oh, actually, I need you to, the motion, repeat the motion, please.
I'll renew the motion that House File 4428 and Senate File 4606 be recommended to pass and be incorporated in the omnibus pension and retirement bill.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed by saying nay. The motion prevails, and House File 4428 and Senate File 4606 is recommended to pass and will be incorporated into the omnibus pension and retirement bill. Our next bill is on workers' compensation offset with 2 para plans from Representative Nelson and Senator Seeberger.
And while the senator's coming up, I'll move that House File 4429 and Senate File 4751 be recommended to pass and be incorporated in the omnibus pension and retirement bill.
Thank you, Representative Nelson. And Representative Nelson and Seeberger, do you have any opening remarks for the bill before I have staff explain it?
Madam Chair, this modifies the limitations on disability benefits payments, and it eliminates the offset that people currently are having to pay when they receive workers' compensation. And I'll let the staff explain the bill.
Absolutely. Thank you, Representative Nelson. Deputy Director Kelly, if you could please explain the bill for us.
Thank you, Chair Herr. The bill modifies the limitation on disability payments for the para-general and correctional plans by eliminating an offset for income received from workers' compensation to match the changes made in 2023 to the para police and fire plan. A member receiving disability benefits will no longer need to report workers' compensation benefits to para, nor will the member's disability benefit be reduced due to income received from workers' compensation. The bill would create parity among para plans related to the offset for workers' compensation. The bill has 5 sections, all of which are effective on January 1st, 2025. Section 1 modifies the limitation on disability benefits for the para general plan by eliminating the offset for workers' compensation. Under the current law, if the sum of a member's disability benefits, workers' compensation benefits, and reemployment earnings exceed the member's salary, the member's disability benefit will be reduced to not exceed the member's salary. The salary used for this purpose is either the member's salary at the date of injury or the current salary for similar positions, whichever is greater. Section 1 removes workers' compensation benefits from this calculation. As a result, a member's disability benefit would only be reduced if the member's benefit plus reemployment earnings exceed the member's salary. Section 2 amends the limitation on disability benefits pertaining to members of the para-general plan that return to work with a public employer for a trial period and continue to receive disability benefits for up to 6 months. Section 2 eliminates the offset for workers' compensation for disability benefits paid to a member during this trial period. Section 3 eliminates a requirement for members to report income received from workers' compensation to para. This provision applies to members of the para general, correctional, and police and fire plans. Section 4 modifies the limitation on benefits for the para correctional plan. These changes mirror the changes made by Section 1 and eliminate the offset for workers' compensation. Section 5 repeals 2 subdivisions. The first subdivision is Section 353.33, Subdivision 5, which applies to members of the para-general plan. Repealing this subdivision eliminates another reference to the offset for workers' compensation. The second subdivision is Section 353.335, Subdivision 2, which was added by the 2023 legislation that eliminated the offset for workers' compensation for the para police and fire plan. This subdivision exempts members of the police and fire plan receiving disability benefits from reporting workers' compensation to para. Due to the changes made by Section 3 of the bill, this subdivision is no longer necessary. Thank you, Chair Herr. That concludes my review.
Thank you, Deputy Director Kelly. And so I understand that we have our testifiers from para here today. If you want to identify yourself for the record and begin.
Chair Herr, my name is Amy Stringy. I am the policy coordinator for para. I'll just briefly walk through the purpose of the bill before you. Sean did an excellent job in summarizing it. The bill makes a favorable adjustment to the disability offset calculation for para-general and para-correctional disability recipients. Currently, the process is that if a member is receiving a disability benefit, it is reduced or offset by their workers' comp benefit if their benefit amount plus workers' comp and or reemployment earnings exceeds that member's salary at the time of the injury or in a comparable salary, whichever is greater. The bill eliminates the workers' compensation component from that calculation, and that is a change that is favorable to disability recipients. The bill also changes for the para-general plan how the calculation occurs for these members. It had been used in statute, the single life annuity, and now we're using the benefit amount. So the bill achieves parity for para in 2 ways, in how we treat workers' compensation for disability recipients, and then also the base amount that we're using to determine the calculation.
Thank you, Ms. Stringy. And Director Anderson, will you be testifying as well or just answering questions? All right, thank you. Are there any members of the public here today who would like to testify on this bill? If not, we will go ahead and move to member questions. Members, any questions, discussion on the bill in front of us? Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to the question from the previous bill, what does this do as far as funding for PRA? Do we have a net loss as a result of benefit adjustment on here? Or how is that going to be addressed? Or are we revenue neutral? Where are we at?
Ms. Strenge.
Madam Chair, Representative Driscoll, it's a very minor amount. Currently for para general, there are actually 0 members that would be impacted by this change. And then for the para correctional plan, there's 5 members. So it's, I would let Doug speak to the exact cost, but it's very minor.
Mr. Anderson, do you want to speak to the actual cost?
Madam Chair, exact cost would vary by member. We haven't looked exactly what that is, but it's such a small portion of the plan and a small benefit to that group that it would be pretty immaterial to the plan.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Any follow-up, Representative Driscoll? Any further discussion? Well, this one moved very quickly. All right. Seeing that there's no further discussion, Representative Nelson or Senator Seeberger, would you like to offer any closing remarks and then renew your motion?
No, thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I would urge members to support this bill. The cost would be minimal. It is fair. It's the fair and right thing to do for the workers. And I'll let Senator Nelson read his motion.
I was just demoted, but anyway, I renew my motion that House File 4429 and Senate File 4751 be recommended to pass and be incorporated in the omnibus pension and retirement bill.
Thank you. Members, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. The motion prevails, and House File 4429, Senate File 4751 is recommended to pass and will be incorporated into the omnibus pension and retirement bill. I find that I transition between bills really quickly, so I'm going to give like a second so that people can make their way down from the table. All right, our next bill is from Representative Tabke and Senator Hauschild, codifying reemployment plan for the state patrol plan with MSRS. And because Representative Tabke is not a member of the commission, I will move to lay over House File 4553 and Senate File 4645 for possible inclusion in the omnibus pension and retirement bill. Welcome to the commission, Representative Tabke. I think this is your first time in front of us. Is that correct?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
And I do understand that we have 2 amendments. Executive Director Susan Lincheski, can you explain the bill and the 2 amendments in front of us?
Thank you, Chair Herr. Yes, my name is Susan Lincheski. I'm the Executive Director of the Commission. House File 4553 and its companion, Senate File 4645, amend Chapter 352B, which governs the State Patrol Retirement Plan. It adds a new section, 352B.115, which puts into law a policy and procedure regarding reemployment that has been operational for many years. As explained in my staff memo, the bill documents a reemployment program in which members are able to retire and begin to receive a retirement annuity, return to covered employment, and during the period of reemployment, continue making employee contributions while the employer continues to make employer contributions. And during the reemployment, the member continues to accrue credit for additional service and salary. When the member eventually retires for the second time, which must occur by the mandatory retirement age of 60, the member's retirement annuity is recalculated to include the additional service and salary accrued during the period of employment. Under the bill, that amount is also reduced by the value of the monthly payments made during the period of reemployment. This reemployment program is very different from the others at MSRS and generally for the public pension plans. In those cases, when reemployed members come back to work, they will not continue to accrue additional salary and service credit, and their pension payments will be suspended when they reach an annual maximum. During the period of employment, then, the contributions are not made. No employee and employer contributions are made to the plan. And then at the end of the reemployment, the member receives a lump sum payment of the suspended annuity amounts after reemployment ends. I'll go briefly through the subdivisions in the bill. Subdivision 1 states that a member who retires and starts taking an annuity may return to reemployment after a break in service. The break needs to be 1 day if the member is at least age 55, or 30 days if the member is younger than 55 but at least 50, which is the early retirement age. Subdivision 2 states that the return to employment will not impact the retirement annuity, which will continue without increase or decrease. And it also states that the member must continue making the employee contributions, and the member's employer must continue making employer and supplemental contributions. Those amounts are 15.5 roughly for the employee contributions, that's percent of pay, and for employers, that's about 30% of pay. Subdivision 3 requires MSRS to recalculate the annuity when the member retires for the second time. And as I mentioned earlier, that recalculation must include the additional service and salary earned during the period of reemployment, and must be reduced by the benefit payments made during the reemployment. Subdivision 4 states that the return to employment provisions in Chapter 352, which apply to the other plans, general and correctional, do not apply to the state patrol members. Subdivision 5 states that the reemployment right does not impact the state patrol retirement, mandatory retirement age, which is age 60. And this new law is effective the day following final enactment. There are 2 amendments to the bill. Amendment 1A makes changes to the bill requested by Aaron Leonard and a change suggested by our actuary. The actuary's change was to provide more precise language on how the recalculation is to be done. That appears over in line 2.6 on the second page of the bill. And the language is that when the member leaves reemployment, the reduction must be for the actuarial equivalent value of the annuity payments made before and during the period of reemployment. The changes requested by Ms. Leonard at MSRS appear on lines 1.14 and lines 1.15. The insert at clause B, at line 1.14 is a new clause B, and that is added to require the executive director to seek repayment of any annuity payments made if the member comes back too early, before the break in service period required. Other non-substantive changes are made at 1.15, 2.5, and 2.6. That's Amendment 1. Amendment 2A.
Director Linczewski, I'm thinking maybe can we do them separately so that people don't have to try to remember what 1A and the 2A are? Can we do that? Okay, so members, I just maybe want to open it up to any discussion on the 1A before I go ahead and move the amendment to be considered. If anybody has any questions on that. Senator Rasmusson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at the 1A and the 2A amendment, and there's some overlap in language, and so I'm just wondering if staff could explain if both amendments are adopted, how that is reconciled.
Good question. So maybe we're just going to go ahead and have Director Linczewski talk about the second amendment as well. That way, then you know. I did notice the same thing as well, but we needed to actually pass it in that order just so that we have the bill in the proper order. But I guess we'll go ahead and Director Linczewski, if you want to explain the 2A amendment as well.
Thank you, Chair Herr, Senator Rasmusson. The 2A does make all of the changes requested by Aaron Leonard. So the several non-substantive changes are made, as well as the new clause, clause subdivision 1B, I believe. The overlapping change, though, and the one that I think is going to be worked out over the next few weeks, is to the second page over in subdivision 3. And that change is to substantially revise the program. So in that case, instead of the recalculation at the end, instead the members will receive a refund of their contribution made during the period of reemployment plus interest, and and there won't be any recalculation. So the members will return to employment. They will continue to pay into the plan, as will the employer. And then when they will continue to receive their annuity. When they then retire the second time, there will not be any recalculation, but they will receive a refund of their employee contributions. So it does directly conflict with the current program and what was in the bill and in Amendment 1A.
Thank you, Director Linczewski. And usually I would move each one and we would vote on it, but because they're so similar, I'm just going to let us have discussion first. And then once we we feel okay with both amendments, then I will move them and have them adopted. Senator Rasmussen, did you have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Question for Ms. Lancheski. So does the 2A amendment, is that, because it's my understanding the 1A is feedback from MSRS, the 2A is feedback from the actuary, but the 2A includes the requested changes from the 1A, or is there a gap?
Director Lancheski.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Rasmussen, Chair Herr. The 1A reflects changes that were requested by Ms. Leonard at MSRS, as well as a change to the language from our commission actuary. The 2A arose as a result of conversations with Mr. Ledoux, Mike Ledoux, who is the, I believe, the president of the State Patrol Association. So those changes are only attributable to the request we received from him.
Senator Rasmussen. Any further discussions, members? Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering, is there an impact, an actuarial impact? And is there going to be an impact to the state? I don't see any numbers here that would indicate how this impacts the fund or the state employer.
Director Lancheski.
Thank you, Senator Nelson and Chair Herr. We might ask Ms. Leonard if she could come up and speak to that. Under the bill, there should not be any impact, I understand, because of the way the recalculation is done, that it will not then cause the actuarial equivalent reduction will help keep the plan intact. The other, I think the way the program is administered now is slightly different, and there may be some impact on the liabilities.
Thank you.
Director Leonard, if you could identify yourself and then respond to Senator Nelson's question.
Madam Chair, members, good morning. Erin Leonard, Executive Director of MSRS. The way the program is currently set up, there is a slight impact to the fund as far as, because we do not take into account the actuarial calculation like suggested by the Pension Commission actuary. We've had it, it's very rarely used. I'm aware of 4 individuals that have returned to work and had this happen. The way that the amendments are both written, there is not an impact to the fund. 2A slightly actually helps the fund because we keep that employer contribution. So that would be a slight gain.
Follow-up, Senator Nelson?
Yep, thank you. So that small employer contribution that is retained would be the potential increase to the actuarial, or to the fund, but it is used so rarely, or would be used so rarely, that it's a very minor impact. Is that correct?
Director Leonard.
Madam Chair, Senator Nelson, that's correct. I think the thought is that perhaps with this in law, it would be more broadly used than it has been in the past. So the potential gain to the fund is hard to know, but it would be a gain regardless of how frequently it's used.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just one final comment. I would assume or hope that this action would increase the ranks of our public service members here. And we know that that's incredibly important. And so is that maybe the genesis behind this, to try and make sure that all of those very well-trained State Patrol members that we have who for some reason retire early but are willing to come back are able to do so without financial harm?
Representative Tabke or Mr. Ledoux?
Yes, Madam Chair and Senator Nelson, that's exactly the reason why we're bringing this bill forward. So this has, we have a significant gap in where we want to be on number of troopers and other law enforcement in our ranks today. And so we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can. And what this does is codifies the language that's already in practice to make sure that it's very clear, very straightforward, that we're able to make sure that this program is more well utilized to make sure that those highly educated that we've made a huge investment in as a state, that those troopers stay with us and are able to continue serving if they'd like to.
Senator
Thank you,
Nelson.
Madam Chair.
Okay. Senator Howe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is it possible we can hear the testimony before we decide which amendment we would like to move? Because I would like to hear the testimony on why we're doing
Sure. Senator Howe, I think that that's not normally how we do. We usually try to put the bill in the order that the author would like. But I think in light of, the similarities of the amendments, I think it might be important for us to do. So I think that Ms. Leonard, are you the, let's see here. I guess it's Mr. Ledoux who's going to be the testifier for this bill. Would you be okay with us sort of changing this around and having you testify now on the bill?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. Please identify yourself for the record and begin the testimony.
Madam Chair, my name is Mike Ledoux. Committee members, I've served as a state trooper for the last 3 decades. It's been an honor and a privilege. I currently serve as the president of the Minnesota State Patrol Troopers Association, and I'm also the elected representative on the MSRS Pension Board. I come before you today in full support of House File 4553 and Senate File 4645. And I extend my gratitude to Representative Tabke and Senator Hauschild for their commitment to this cause and acknowledge the collaborative efforts of those who have worked diligently to shape this important legislation. Today I stand not just as a representative, but as an advocate for the reemployment legislation, which I passionately refer to as KEEPS, Keep Experienced Emergency Personnel Serving. This legislation encapsulates the policies and procedures that have been in practice for MSRS. It's my understanding for at least the past 15 years. It's a vital initiative that when codified will fortify the foundation of the State Patrol retirement plan. As we consider the current state of the State Patrol retirement plan, we have approximately 979 active members. But it's crucial to recognize that within the next 5 years, 205 of those members will reach full retirement age. Simultaneously, the Para Police and Fire Fund will see 2,264 members reaching full retirement age as well, bringing the combined total to 2,469. Given the mandatory retirement age for state law enforcement officers, the need for a well-structured reemployment program becomes imperative. In an era where recruitment challenges are acutely felt nationwide, the State Patrol is no exception. The decline in applicants is stark. For instance, the State Patrol received only 77 applicants for our traditional academy, compared to 1,200 applicants when I was hired. The city of Minneapolis, too, has a significant reduction in sworn officers, from approximately 800 in 2019 to 503 approximately presently, despite dedicated efforts and investments in recruitment initiatives. The Post Board webpage currently has 27 pages of job announcements, and only 586 individuals passed the peace officer licensing exam in 2023. The college to career pipeline lacks significant numbers of law enforcement students to fill current and future vacancies. So we need to focus equally on recruitment and retention of these dedicated and experienced state law enforcement officers. This bill addresses the pressing need to attract and retain experienced personnel by allowing retired State Patrol plan members to return to service without impacting the retirement annuity. This not only incentivizes our seasoned professionals to stay engaged, but also contributes to the overall skill and knowledge base within the agencies served by the State Patrol retirement plan, resulting in an enhanced law enforcement outcome for the communities we serve. The financial sustainability of the State Patrol plan is fortified through continued contributions of reemployed members, coupled with the necessary employer and supplemental contributions. This ensures stability and security for our retired officers while maintaining the fiscal health of the retirement plan. In summary, reemployed retired State Patrol members is not just good policy, it's a strategic necessity. It allows us to tap into a wealth of institutional knowledge and experience, efficiently utilizing this expertise for the betterment of our respective agencies and the communities at large. I urge your support for this crucial bill as we navigate these challenges. We must remain focused on recruiting, retaining, and respecting these dedicated public safety professionals, Madam Chair, I would be happy to answer any follow-up questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ledoux. And Representative Tacky, kind of the order we've been going in, I should maybe just let you have your opening remarks as well, so that maybe that'll give background for some of the questions that we might be having. If you want to proceed, just introduce yourself too, for the record.
Thank you very much, Chair Hurt. I really appreciate it, and thank you very much, members, for talking about this important, really important bill that we have in front of us today. We have a crisis that is currently happening, and it's going to get even worse unless we continue to do something about it, with making sure that we have enough law enforcement to not only cover the state, but to serve our communities, and making sure that we're doing what we can to improve that situation. So thank you very much to Mr. Ledoux for bringing this to me and discussing it and talking about where we're at and what we can do to help with this situation. So with this bill, as I mentioned before to Senator Nelson, we will take and help use this as a stopgap measure to make sure that we are keeping as many qualified, willing troopers in place, and everybody in that troopers bargaining unit, to make sure that we are keeping them in place if they so choose to stay in service. And so that's what this bill does, and I'm excited to move it forward.
Thank you, Representative Tabke. And I just want to make sure, is there anybody here, member of the public, who'd like to testify on this bill as well? Seeing none, can we hold off member questions until we adopt this, or is the member question related to being able to adopt it? Okay, Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I think I understand the difference between subdivision 3 and the second half of the 2A, but I'd like Ms. Linczewski to just explain it again, and then also to know, is the 2A the preferred choice of the author?
Director Linczewski.
Yeah, thank you. So the 2A replaces what is the current program, and the features of the current program are that the member is continuing to receive the pension during the period of reemployment, making employee contributions in as is the employer. And then at the end of the period of reemployment, the benefit is recalculated based on the additional service and salary and reduced by the benefit payments made for the period of reemployment. So that's the current program. The new program under 2A would be similar in that you would continue to receive your pension. The member will continue to receive the pension and will be making employee and employer contributions in, but there will be no accrual of additional service and salary. So there's not a recalculation at the end. They will get a refund of their employee contributions. Employer contributions will stay in the plan, which is the gain to the plan that Ms. Leonard is talking about.
Senator Pappas.
And just my follow-up question to the author is, and the advocates, is the 2A then the preferred amendment that you wanted to adopt into the bill?
And Senator, and I'll turn that to Representative Tabke in just a bit, but from what I understand is that we have to actually adopt the 1A first and then the 2A, because the 2A also makes adjustments to some of the language from the 1A. Is that correct? Representative Tabke or Director Linczewski?
Chair, yes, that is my understanding from the brilliant staff in pensions, that we need to take the 1A and then the 2A.
Got it. Director Linczewski, any comments?
Thank you, Representative Chair Her. So the 2A is a standalone. You could adopt it, and it will incorporate the changes that Ms. Leonard has asked for. The reason for the 1A is that the point of the bill was to put into law the current program. Recent changes, which caused the 2A then to be drafted, occurred on Friday morning. And so I think we're just hoping for a little bit of time between now and when this is added to the omnibus bill to make sure that the new program, which again, we just heard about on Friday morning, is what, you know, everybody, all the stakeholders want. So that's it. Thank you, Senator.
Any further questions or discussion? Representative O'Driscoll.
Point of clarification, so we're going to lay this over pending what Ms. Linczewski talked about, getting clarification, and we'll bring it back at some point when we've got the right language and more input from stakeholders. Is that what I'm understanding?
Representative O'Driscoll, that is my understanding, that the stakeholders are still going to, once all of this is incorporated, to relook at it to ensure that the language has the program executed as intended.
Well, if that's the chair's understanding, she gets to decide whether it goes in or gets laid over, so there you go.
Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. Any further comments or questions? Seeing no further discussion, then I am going to move the 1A amendment to be considered. Members, since we've already had discussion on this, I'm just going to then, let's see here, just want to make sure I do the right thing so I get the bill in the right order here. Seeing that we've already had discussion, then I am going to just have us vote on the 1A amendment, which is for House File 4553 and Senate File 4645. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And all those opposed, saying nay.
Nay.
The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Now I'm going to move the 2A amendment to be considered. And again, since we've already had discussion on this, all those in favor of adopting the 2A amendment to House File 4553, Senate File 4645, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying nay. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. So now we are back to the bill as amended. So Representative Tabke, I don't know if there's any further comments or our testifiers. Otherwise, we're just going to reopen this up for member questions as the bill is in the order that you intended to be.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, are you asking for closing comments now, or?
No, just if you have anything to add before we go back to some member questions.
No, I just appreciate everyone putting the bill in the order that we would like it and that the troopers would like to see this moving forward.
Thank you, Representative Tabke. Member questions. Senator Rasmusson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for Ms. Leonard. Does the MSRS board have a position on this bill?
Ms. Leonard.
Madam Chair, Senator Rasmussen, the MSRS board doesn't have a position on this bill. We haven't discussed it quite yet.
Any further questions, members? Senator Rasmusson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would just encourage the stakeholders to, work with the MSRS board and to maybe have this be something that they discuss and, make sure that they're okay with it before we move forward. I do fully appreciate the openings that we have within the State Patrol and across law enforcement. I think this could be a really good tool to help attract and retain more officers and to help fill some of those open positions or prevent attrition. So I think this is a really important idea for us to take a look at. I just want to make sure we get it right. One other question I had, Madam Chair, is do we have anyone from the administration or from the State Patrol here today?
I'm sorry, Senator. I was distracted. Representative Volkman's coughing. I did not hear the last part of it. You could repeat that, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was wondering if we had anyone from the administration or from State Patrol here today. I wanted to see if they have a position on this bill or any comments to add.
Do we have anybody here? It looks like we do not have anybody here, Senator Rasmussen. But I do hear members' concerns about ensuring that all the stakeholders are on board before we pass something. And so we will encourage our author and Mr. Ledoux and MSRS and their board to continue to work together on this. Representative Driscoll, did you have a question?
Just to clarify for Senator Rasmussen, because it's affecting MSRS State Patrol Fund, anyone, I'm assuming, whether they're part of Mr. Ledoux's group or if they're part of a, not part of the collective bargaining unit, would still be affected by this outcome because we're not doing it for the program or the union. We're doing it for the entire participation in MSRS State Patrol.
Mr. Ledoux, I don't know if there is a response to Representative Driscoll's comment.
Madam Chair, Representative O'Driscoll is correct. This would ultimately affect all state law enforcement officers, the BCA, DNR, et cetera. I have discussed it with stakeholders of those respective groups, and to this point, I have not had anybody object to the concept of what we're trying to do, recognizing, of course, that when you have a large volume of people going out, but not a sufficient volume coming in, it starts to have an adverse effect on the fund. I spent considerable time researching different similar programs throughout the United States. The federal government is currently doing a similar program. They call it reemployed annuitants. They grant these individuals a deferred compensation waiver. So in other words, they return to work, draw their annuity without consequence, and also get the salary that they had while working for the federal government. I believe the military is starting to implement similar programs to retain experienced military folks.
Any follow-up, Representative O'Driscoll? No. I had a question, if there's no more member questions or discussion. I'm just curious if you could give me an example. I just want to understand that if a trooper decides that they're going to retire early, I guess, is the incentive for them to come back and what we're giving them, why would somebody come out of retirement? Like if they decided they wanted to retire early anyways, I want to just maybe have a better understanding of why this incents them to come back. Mr. Ledoux.
Madam Chair, I'd be happy to tell you from my 30 years. For those here today, I'm still a road trooper, so I like to say I'm very in tune with the rank and file officer. The vast majority of State Patrol Plan members put a mark on the calendar when they're about to hit 55, and I think Aaron Leonard could attest, we have very few people that work past 55. It is our hope that offering this incentive perhaps for someone that maybe didn't put enough in their retirement accounts while they were working, this would give them the opportunity to come back and make up for things such as that. We do have a large number of our members that do seek employment outside of law enforcement, and what we hope to do is convince them and persuade them to stay for a couple more years so we can collectively try to find a solution to this crisis that is on the horizon and is actually here.
Thank you, Mr. Ledoux. And I don't know if this is for Ms. Leonard, but I would like to see maybe once this is implemented a year or two after, to see if it really is the incentive that brings people back. I often find that we create legislation that we think will solve a problem, and sometimes it doesn't, and then we don't revisit the issues. And so I'm not saying that this isn't the right solution. I would say that, we would, since MSRS had been doing this unofficially for a while, and we'd only seen what Ms. Leonard used at 4, take up on this, that I would love to kind of see the data afterwards, because if this is truly the right incentive, we do have other plans in which industries are really struggling with getting people employed, reemployed back into those industries. And so I would love to maybe just, note to see some data on the results of this in a few years after it's been implemented. Okay. Any further discussion from our members? Okay, seeing that there is no further discussion, since Representative Tabke is not a member of our commission, I will renew the motion that House File 45. I'm sorry, Representative Tabke, did you want to have any closing comments before I do that? My apologies.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you to you, Madam Chair, as well as Director Lincheski and Mr. Sumo Langer for all the help in getting this done, as well as Mr. Ledoux for getting this to where we're at today. It has been a lot of work, and I've been learning a lot about pensions as we've been going on, so I just appreciate everybody taking the time to help me through this and to get somewhere where this is something that will be very well used, and that's the intent, is to make sure that we have something that is solid and very easy to understand for our troopers and everyone in the unit to utilize this program and stay in service to this day. So I just appreciate everyone's support.
Thank you, Representative Tabke. With that, I do renew my motion that House File 4553, Senate File 4645, as amended, be laid over for possible inclusion in the Omnibus Pension and Retirement Bill. This bill is laid over. And in my effort to give a little bit of time for transition, our last bill on the agenda today is a supplemental plan contribution eligibility to secure matching funds, and Representative Pursell is the House author with Senator Westlin as the Senate author. There you both are, and welcome to the commission. And if the two of you, actually, Senator Westlin, if you want to move the language in front of us, and then we'll do opening remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I move House File 4656 and Senate File 4759 to be recommended to pass and incorporated into the Omnibus Pension and Retirement Bill.
Thank you. And I'm going to actually have Director Lincheski explain the bill first, and then we'll go to your remarks. Director Lincheski.
Thank you, Chair. Her House File 4656 and its companion Senate File 4759 make 3 changes to a statute that governs what are referred to as supplemental pension or deferred compensation plans. Supplemental plans are any retirement plan offered by a public employer that is not a primary plan. And primary plans are the pension and retirement plans administered by our big funds, MSRS, PARA, TRA for teachers, and St. Paul teachers. Public funds are not permitted to be contributed to a supplemental plan under the law, this is section 356.24, unless the supplemental plan is included in the list of exceptions in that section. This subdivision lists 14 exceptions, which include multi-employer plans, such as for the construction trades, and plans that provide health, disability, or life insurance benefits. The exception that is the focus of Section 2 of the bill is for deferred compensation plans. These are defined at subdivision 3 as 403B plans and 457B plans. These are two federal code sections, Internal Revenue Code sections, that govern these plans. The Minnesota deferred compensation is separately listed, but that is a 457B plan. The bill has two sections, effective the day following final enactment. Section 1 adds back into the list of exceptions an exception that had been deleted in 2020 when it was moved into subdivision 3. Since that deletion, we have heard from cities and other stakeholders that sponsor retirement plans under Section 401A of the Internal Revenue Code, that they are no longer able to do so. And these are plans that receive contributions of sick, vacation, and severance pay. So the bill adds that back into the list of exceptions so that these other types of plans, which are we call Section 401A plans, another code section, are able to continue to do so. Section 2 of the bill makes two changes to the definition of deferred compensation plan. The first change at lines 4.7 to 4.9 of the bill is to add agreements between school districts and superintendents as acceptable documentation of a deferred compensation plan. The statute currently permits employment agreements between cities and city managers, but does not also permit employment agreements between school districts and superintendents. Some of us may recall last session, at the end of session, we heard some testimony, and I've included the written statement in the materials about how school districts are in fact entering into these employment agreements, but they're not currently permitted under this part of the statute. The second change at lines 4.21 to 4.31 is to permit public employers who sponsor a supplemental deferred compensation plan to make matching contributions on student loan repayments. And this is recently a change in federal law that allows for matches on student loan repayments. This is a change that appeared in the Secure 2.0 Act of 2022. So the law is revised under the bill to allow for these types of matching contributions by public employers. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Director Linchesky. Representative Pursell and Senator Westlin, would you like to offer any opening remarks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for that wonderful explanation of the bill. I am honored to carry House File 4656, Senate File 4759, because I've seen so many of my friends who are passionate about the profession of teaching specifically, and they fail to put money away in their early career because their student debt obligation is so large. I want to make it easier for our dedicated public servants with student debt to save for retirement. Upon passage of this bill, we're aligning Minnesota state law to match federal law change that counts student loan payments as the employee side of contributions in order to trigger their employer match. Too many of our public servants are teachers, local and county government employees, even legislative staff are not building the kind of secure retirement they will one day need because of student loan debt. This bill will allow them to do that and make sure Minnesota continues to prioritize robust retirement options for its workers.
Senator Westlin, did you have anything you want to add, or should we go to your testifiers?
We can go to testifiers.
Thank you. It looks like we have a couple of testifiers here today. Our first is Libby Eckhoff, elementary education teacher in Anoka, Hennepin. If you can make your way up to the table. And I think the other person, I think we have another one, it's Ken Schulte, is it Schulte or Schult? President CEO of EFS Advisors, if you want to just come up as well, and then we can just go through them. And please identify yourself for the record and then begin your testimony.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the commission. My name is Libby Eckhoff. I'm a teacher in the Anoka Hennepin School District. I'm here today to support File 4656 and to talk about why this legislation is critically necessary for the educators in my local and all across the state. We know that Minnesota ranks 5th in the nation for student debt. More than 900,000 Minnesotans have student debt, and it averages to about $37,000 for each borrower. A statistic that is particularly alarming to me is that the group seeing the largest increase in student loan debt, 46% over the last 5 years, are seniors over the age of 60 who are taking on private student loan debt for their kids or grandkids to pursue higher education. We also know that student debt has a disparate impact for communities of color. Across Minnesota, 8% of student loan holders who live primarily in white communities have debt in collection, but in communities of color, a staggering 24%, or nearly 1 in 4 people with student loan debt have that debt in collection. Educators are particularly aware of the problems around student debt because we take on more than the average amount of debt to go into our field. I have worked as an elementary teacher for only 5 years, having seen no substantial increase in pay. I currently pay for my student loans using the income-based repayment tool, and even using this calculated payment leaves me stressed to cover my remaining necessary expenses of housing, groceries, and transportation. Realistically, I know that the only way to make any meaningful increase in my wages is to take on more student debt by obtaining my master's degree. Pursuing my master's degree is a difficult decision to make, as it will make my already overwhelming student debt even larger. Teacher compensation does not match the student debt that we take on. In Minnesota, there is a 28% pay gap between a teacher with a master's and a similar credentialed professional. We go into our profession because we love our work and we want to make a difference in children's lives, but we leave because of the lack of pay and lack of respect. This bill would ensure that teachers, particularly those new to the profession, can pay rent and still save for retirement. As you know, it is critical to begin saving for retirement and as early as you can, and this bill will make sure teachers aren't choosing between their golden years and buying their groceries. Thank you for hearing this bill.
Thank you, Ms. Eckhoff. Next, we have Ken Schult. Please identify yourself for the record and begin.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you. My name is Trent Pepper. I serve as General Counsel of EFS Advisors in Avabin, and with leave of the chair and the committee, I would like to offer these comments in place of Mr. Schutte.
We're like all up in a frenzy over here, Mr. Pepper, right?
Yes.
Yes, please go ahead.
All right, thank you. EFS Advisors and Avabin works with school districts and their employees on the administration and utilization of their 403B plans. The need for the student loan match provisions of this bill arises from the current language of 356.24, which provides that school districts and other Minnesota governmental entities can only make an employer matching contribution to a supplemental retirement plan on the basis of an employee's contribution to the plan itself. But effective January 1st, the Federal Secure 2.0 Act provided that permitted employers to treat student loan payments made by an employee as if those were an employee contribution to the plan, and allow an employer to make that employer match on the basis of those student loan payments. So under Secure 2.0, this is not an employer payment on the student loan. That's a misconception that sometimes arises from Secure 2.0. This simply allows an employer to treat an employee's own student loan payments as if those were a retirement plan contribution for purposes of making the employer match. This also does not in any way advantage employees with student loans over those who do not have student loans. Another item to note is that this is optional for employers. There is nothing in either Secure 2.0 or the proposed amendments to 356.24 that would require an employer to adopt this provision as part of their 403B or other supplemental retirement plan. In working with school districts, we have heard from superintendents and business office officials who would very much like to incorporate this provision into their 403B plans, but are currently unable to do so because of the language of 356.24. We have heard that we have school districts that are ready to implement this effective for the coming fall school year, but they cannot do so unless 356.24 is amended. So we support amending the statute to align with the student loan match provisions of the Secure 2.0 Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pepper. Are there any other members of the public here who would like to testify on this bill? If not, we will move to member questions. Members, any discussion on this bill? Seeing that there are no discussions, we can go ahead and move to our testifier, to our author's closing comments, and then to renew your motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I would just reiterate what has already been said, that the teaching profession is another profession that is really struggling both to attract and retain employees and teachers. And this just provides an opportunity for school districts to recruit teachers by offering them another tool. So I look forward to your support for this really wonderful bill.
Thank you. Representative Pursell, any other, thank you. All right, and then Senator Westlin, if you could renew the motion.
Thank you. I renew my motion that House File 4656 and Senate File 4759 be recommended to pass and be incorporated into the Omnibus Pension and Retirement Bill.
Thank you, and all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by saying nay. The motion prevails, and House File 4656, Senate File 4759 is recommended to pass and will be incorporated into the Omnibus Pension and Retirement Bills. That concludes our business for today. Members, our next commission hearing will be on Monday, March 18th. And seeing no further business in front of this committee, this meeting is adjourned.